The heat, pressed down like a punishment, heavy and unflinching. As Eleanor stood on the gravel shoulder with nothing but her handbag, a now soggy pie tin, and the hollow ache that comes from being discarded so easily. The SUV's taillights had disappeared into the horizon long ago, and the buzzing silence that replaced them was louder than anything Kira had ever said to her face. The birthday pie, apple cinnamon, her grandson's favourite, dripped syrup onto her lap as she sat on a chipped concrete barrier near the highway sign, the filling bleeding through the foil like something wounded. She could still hear Kira's voice in her head, sugar-dipped and biting. Maybe next year just send a card, yeah? Followed by one of those condescending laughs that never quite reached her eyes. Eleanor had stayed quiet out of habit, out of love for her son, out of the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, Kira's cruelty was temporary, something that would pass like a bad storm. But storms don't leave bruises. People do. And this moment, sitting roadside with nothing but heatstroke and humiliation, made something inside Eleanor settle. Not snap. Settle. Like dust after an earthquake. She stood up slowly, brushed the crumbs off her skirt, and began walking toward the gas station ahead, each step less about rescue and more about reclaiming. She didn't cry. Tears were for the hopeful, the heartbroken. Eleanor was neither anymore. She was done waiting, for cars, for apologies, for permission. Somewhere between the blistering shoulder and the sliding glass door of that gas station, a thought bloomed in her chest like a quiet revolt. They had mistaken her silence for surrender. Again. But this time, they wouldn't see the ending coming. Not until it was already signed, sealed, and swept out from beneath their feet. What happened next will shock you. But before we continue, hit that subscribe button for more stories like this. The key clicked in the lock with a heaviness Eleanor hadn't noticed before, like even the door had grown tired of being taken for granted. The house was quiet, but not the peaceful kind. It was the silence of a space that had long stopped feeling like hers. Dishes piled in the sink she didn't dirty. A half-drunk glass of wine on the end table, lipstick stained, not hers. Her name was on everything in this house except their mouths. She walked past the mess and into the hallway closet, where the old fireproof safe sat beneath linens she hadn't used in years. Inside, a worn accordion folder burst with 30 years of documents. Birth certificates, utility receipts, warranty slips, and the crisp, unbroken deed with her name spelled out in black ink. No co-signer, no joint, anything. Just Eleanor. She had always been meticulous, not out of mistrust, but out of the quiet knowledge that the world rarely rewarded women who didn't protect what was theirs. She had built this home with the money her husband left behind, her candle shop earnings, and 1,000 small sacrifices that no one ever saw. And now they lounged on her sofa like royalty, leaving her to clean the ashes of their entitlement. Kira had mocked her, then abandoned her on the side of the highway like luggage in the wrong terminal. But she didn't understand the math. Eleanor hadn't just given them shelter, she'd let them borrow her kingdom. And now it was time to take the keys back. Her hands didn't shake as she laid out the documents on the kitchen table. She read them like old love letters, every clause a reminder that this space was never a gift. It was grace. And grace, once burned, doesn't return empty-handed. Eleanor didn't feel rage. She felt alignment, like a bone finally popping back into place after being out of socket too long. This wasn't petty. It wasn't cruel. It was correction. And as she picked up the phone to dial a realtor she hadn't spoken to in years, she thought, not for the first time, that sometimes the softest women leave the sharpest signatures. The stench of vinegar and plastic hits Eleanor first, the garbage bin left half open, the pie she baked just hours ago oozing into a crumpled paper plate. The crust flattened like it had been dropped without care. The pie dish she'd used since her son was 5, now balancing on a juice box and something green and expired. She doesn't touch it, just stares at the ruin, at the birthday candles still in their package, tucked safely in her bag, like a broken promise. She places them on the counter as if they still matter, then opens the fridge out of habit, not hope. No cake, no leftovers from a family dinner. Just 2 half-empty containers of Thai takeout, a case of seltzer, and 3 wine coolers lined up like trophies. A birthday without a grandmother, without her. She stands still, blinking once, then twice, not because she's surprised, but because this is the moment the guessing ends. She wasn't forgotten. She was erased. She moves slowly through the house, the rhythm of her steps steady and deliberate, as if retracing where love used to live. The throw blanket she crocheted now lies balled under a pile of unfolded laundry. The hallway mirror she bought on a whim, now smudged with fingerprints, streaks, and someone else's lipstick shade. Everything here had changed, redecorated in ways that stripped out the soul, scrubbed of the touches that once made it home. She climbs the stairs one by one, stopping only when her fingers brush the banister. She feels the smooth dip in the wood where her husband's hand used to rest. She painted it soft almond in 2003 after the flood, restained it herself when they couldn't afford contractors. Her voice is barely more than breath when she says it aloud. You don't belong to this? Not Kira, not her son, not anyone who thinks a woman's value ends with her usefulness. The walls don't echo back, but they listen, and Eleanor knows. She isn't the maid. She isn't the burden. She is the foundation, and foundations don't ask to stay. They choose when to stand and when to let everything else fall. The bell above the office door jingles with a sound Eleanor remembers from a different season of life, when she'd deliver cinnamon wax melts and lavender jars to farmers' markets, back when her hands smelled of beeswax and purpose. The realtor, a warm-eyed woman named Gina, who once bought 24 of Eleanor's holiday candles for corporate gifts, greets her like an old friend, though there's a flicker of surprise behind her practiced smile. Eleanor slides the folder across the desk without small talk. Deed, title, tax records, all current, all hers. Gina flips through the pages with a practiced eye, pausing only to say, "No liens, no co-owners. This place could sell in a heartbeat." Eleanor nods, her fingers laced in her lap. "Then list it." Gina leans back in her chair, the kind with the leather worn just right, and studies her. They don't know, do they? It isn't judgment, it's curiosity. A woman-to-woman check-in. Eleanor's smile is soft, but it holds an edge honed by years of swallowing disrespect. "No," she says, "but they will." Gina doesn't press, just nods once and begins typing, her acrylic nails clicking against the keyboard like punctuation. School district? Excellent. Upgrades? Plenty. Kira had made sure of that, shopping for fixtures like she owned the walls they hung from. Curb appeal? Solid. And the fact that the house would be shown with zero legal resistance made it the kind of listing agents fought over. Eleanor watches as her home becomes a commodity on a glowing screen, a few clicks away from leaving their lives forever. And still, there's no rage in her chest. No guilt, either. Just a strange, steady clarity, like looking through water after years of murk. She had spent decades holding the seams together, expecting at least a thread of gratitude. But now she would stitch herself into something new. Gina prints the preliminary paperwork and as Eleanor signs, she doesn't hesitate. Not once. With each stroke of the pen, she isn't just signing away a house. She's reclaiming space, dignity, silence retooled into action. She doesn't look back when she leaves the office. Doors, after all, were made to be closed. Eleanor doesn't slam a single drawer. She doesn't stomp. There's no flurry of rage, no cinematic outburst, just a calm, so razor-sharp it feels like steel wrapped in silk. She moves through the house like a curator of her own history, choosing with quiet precision what to take and what to leave behind. The wedding china, boxed in the same crinkled tissue she once used to pack it before her honeymoon. The quilts, stitched during winters when her husband was still alive and the living room hummed with laughter. The photo albums, faded at the edges but still full of small hands, first bikes and holidays where smiles weren't forced. Her mother's earrings, tucked into a velvet pouch, still carrying the scent of old lilac perfume. These are the things that mattered, not the flat-screen television, not the trendy credenzas Kira insisted on ordering, not the espresso machine that made more noise than coffee. On Tuesday, she calls the moving company. An older man answers, soft-spoken and kind, and she books them for Saturday morning without fanfare. By Wednesday, she's signed the seller's disclosure with the realtor, her signature steady, unbothered. By Friday, she's found the place. A modest one-bedroom rental on the other side of town, tucked above a florist and across from a cafe that sells lemon tarts so perfect they melt without apology. There's a rose garden nearby, the kind with a wrought-iron gate and benches shaded by dogwood trees. She doesn't tell anyone where she's going. Doesn't need to. This isn't running. It's arriving. There is no note left on the fridge, no voicemail, no dramatic exit. She simply goes. She takes her peace and her past and drives off before the sun rises, the back seat full of boxes that matter, and the front seat holding her purse, her thermos, and a small voice in her chest whispering, "Finally." The vanishing act isn't about disappearing. It's about choosing where to be seen. And Eleanor is done being a background character in a home she built. Now she's writing herself back into the center of the story. The sun is already dipping when Kira's SUV crunches into the driveway, its tires hissing over gravel Eleanor once laid by hand. The weekend trip had been indulgent. Wine tastings, couples massages, Instagram-perfect brunches. But the smug glow on Kira's face dims the moment she spots the bold, red and white, "For sale" sign planted in the front lawn like a declaration of war. She scoffs, tosses her sunglasses onto the dash, and mutters something snide about neighborhood pranksters. But her chuckle dies quickly when the key doesn't fit. Once, twice, she jiggles the handle. Nothing. She hammers the doorbell. No response. Her son, Eleanor's boy, shrugs and tries the side door, then the back, then the garage keypad. All of them dead. Inside, the house is dark, not dim, powerless. The porch light that once flickered like a beacon. Outside, the humming refrigerator. Gone. The Wi-Fi won't connect. Even the air feels stale, like the home exhaled and never inhaled again. Kira's jaw tightens as she dials Eleanor's number with theatrical fury, finger stabbing at the screen. It rings once, then cuts to voicemail. "Mailbox full," the robotic voice chirps, eerily cheerful. She tries again. Same thing. There's no note, no warning, no answer. Just the unfamiliar silence of being outmaneuvered. She doesn't know that Eleanor's already sipping tea in a rose garden across town, watching birds skim the fountain and feeling, for the first time in years, untouchable. She doesn't know that the utilities had always been in Eleanor's name, that the locks had been rekeyed Thursday, and that the real estate agent had shown the house to 3 buyers that morning. All Kira knows is that the house she thought she owned is now behind glass, and the woman she mocked as fragile just played the quietest, cleanest checkmate she's ever seen. Kira answers the unknown number with a barked, "Hello?" Already on edge from a sleepless night, spent pacing through a powerless house and whispering furiously into a dead Wi-Fi router. On the other end, a chipper voice introduces herself as Gina from Monarch Realty, calling to schedule showings for the property at 48 Wren Hill Drive. Kira blinks, convinced it's a scam or a mistake, until the woman politely confirms Eleanor Quinn as the sole property owner and authorized seller. Kira's voice sharpens like broken glass. "That's my house!" she snaps. But Gina doesn't flinch. "I'm afraid it's not," she replies, with that dangerous calm that only people backed by legal documents can afford. Kira threatens lawyers. Gina mentions public records. Kira brings up renovations. Gina explains that home improvements, unless contractually agreed upon, are considered voluntary enhancements, gifts, essentially. Kira demands proof of ownership. Gina offers to email the deed, time-stamped, with Eleanor's clean title history and 0 outstanding obligations. Paid in full, years ago. No liens, no loans. Just a single name, Eleanor's, unbothered by shared entitlement or the fantasies of freeloaders. Then comes the worst part, the notice. 10 days. That's the legal grace period for informal occupants without tenancy rights. Kira hangs up mid-sentence, her hand shaking as she drops the phone onto the counter where Eleanor once left birthday cards and chicken pot pies. Her husband is slumped on the stairs, face pale, scrolling through emails he suddenly can't access because Eleanor changed the account passwords linked to the smart locks and thermostat. The house is slipping through their fingers like sand, and the more they grab at it, the faster it drains. Kira opens the front door to breathe, but is greeted by a fresh batch of flyers from the realty box outside. Open House Sunday. Just like that, the life they thought they controlled is now a listing. And all the years of brushed-off snubs, all the condescending remarks Kira had tossed like breadcrumbs, have come home to roost. Except this nest was never hers to begin with. And now, the owner's taking it back. The park is humming with the soft rhythm of a Saturday afternoon. Children squealing at the splash pad, birds rustling in the trees, and somewhere in the distance, the hum of a carousel playing a tune that feels like childhood. Eleanor sits beneath the shade of a large oak, a small checkered blanket spread out with sandwiches, lemonade, and a homemade chocolate cake that doesn't need store-bought flair to feel special. Across from her sits her grandson, legs folded, cheeks flushed from laughter, with frosting on his nose, and a grin that doesn't know anything about legal notices or silence over dinner tables. He's too young to understand what she gave up for this moment, and she prefers it that way. The babysitter, a polite teenage girl Eleanor's come to trust, gives them space while she reads on a nearby bench. It's just the two of them, like it used to be before Kira's corrections, before her son's distance turned habitual. Eleanor lights the candles, 7 of them, no fanfare, and he claps before blowing them out in one steady breath. She hands him a gift wrapped in butcher paper and twine, a quilt, soft and warm, stitched with stars and sky blue fabric, his name embroidered in the corner like a promise. He doesn't tear into it. He just unfolds it carefully, runs his small fingers along the seams, then throws his arms around her with a force that makes her breath catch. He doesn't say anything. He doesn't need to. In that hug is everything she ever hoped to keep safe. Love that hadn't been poisoned by pride, or performance, or protocol. Just honest affection between a boy and his grandmother. She kisses the top of his head and closes her eyes for a second longer than usual, letting the moment carve itself into her memory. There are no photographers, no perfect Instagram filters, just breeze, birdsong, and a quilt that says, "You are mine, and I will always show up." For the first time in a long while, Eleanor doesn't feel like a ghost in someone else's house. She feels present, whole, and absolutely unmistakably free. The email lands in Eleanor's inbox on a Thursday morning, while the scent of warm scones fills her small kitchen and sunlight dances across her freshly planted herbs. The subject line is simple: offer accepted, full asking price. 6 days on the market, no haggling, no drama, just clean paperwork and a buyer who loved the home for its charm and bones, unaware of the ghosts of entitlement that once haunted its halls. Eleanor closes her laptop with a calm satisfaction, not smugness. This wasn't revenge. It was release. But as sure as gravity follows flight, Kira's message arrives hours later. Bitter, brittle, laced with entitlement, masked as confusion. "What kind of person does this?" it reads. "After everything we did for you?" Eleanor reads it once, then again, as if it were written in a language that no longer applies to her. Her reply is just 10 words, measured and final. "You mocked me. You left me. Now leave the house." She doesn't explain. She doesn't rehash. She doesn't offer a lifeline disguised as grace. She just presses send, watches the message disappear, then blocks the number without a flinch. No more room for tantrums masquerading as outrage. That night, she sleeps with the windows open, the sea air curling in like a lullaby. No hallway creaks, no muffled arguments through thin walls, just the rhythm of her own breath, steady and unburdened. In the morning, she wakes without a pit in her stomach or a weight on her chest. The world didn't crumble. It simply shifted toward her. And in that quiet shift, Eleanor doesn't feel triumphant. She feels restored. Sometimes the sharpest justice is the kind that doesn't echo. It just ends. The morning hums with birdsong and the rustle of petals swaying in the breeze as Eleanor settles into her wicker chair, a chipped mug of dark roast warming her palms. The porch, wrapped in flowering vines and the scent of early blooms, feels more like sanctuary than structure. No doors slamming, no footsteps thudding across ceilings she never meant to give up, no clipped tones slicing through the quiet. Just stillness, the kind that doesn't beg for company or approval. Her cottage isn't large, but it breathes with her. Books tucked into every corner, wind chimes swaying over hand-tended herbs, and sunlight that pools on the floors like a dog that's finally found its nap spot. She reads when she wants, naps when she pleases, and gardens without looking over her shoulder. No one rolls their eyes at her voice now. No one snickers when she asks a question. She doesn't disappear in her own home anymore. She owns this space, every square inch of it, paid in full, just like her peace. And when she thinks of the house she left behind, it's not with bitterness, but with clarity. That was the chapter she outgrew. This question mark. This is the epilogue no one thought she'd write. The kind with no confrontation, no gloating, just the quiet satisfaction of a woman who drew a line not in anger, but in permanence. She takes a long sip of coffee, watching the sky blush into morning, and exhales the life she left behind, like a breath she'd been holding too long. Eleanor was never just the maid, never the background, never a supporting role in someone else's story. She was the author all along. And now, with nothing but time and roses around her, she smiles. Not for anyone else, not for approval, but for herself. The sweetest quiet is the kind you don't have to earn, only protect. And Eleanor knows this now. Soft does not mean weak. It means deliberate. And sometimes it means walking away so you can finally hear your own life speak back.